Okay, good. Okay. So focus on the fruit. Let's get started. So just to remind you all, there is materials you can download, a few books from me at fruitfest.co.uk/book. There's some offers available this weekend only. That'll all finish today. And take advantage of those if those are something that you'd benefit from. One moment. Okay, good. Keep going. Right, we're going to be talking about fruit, and we must build a wholly positive relationship with fruit if we wish to be successful on a raw vegan diet. I want to talk about why fruit is so important for human health. And a lot of the reason that I would like to focus on fruit, not just as it's a healthy part of your diet and really an essential part of making the raw vegan diet work, but there's a little bit of a negative feeling, I think, towards fruit that is completely unwarranted, and people have worries around eating fruit, and people have concerns about eating fruit or too much fruit. And even in the raw food world, in the raw food movement, there is sometimes negative thoughts or feelings or ideas towards fruit, or at least historically there have been. What I personally see, and you can tell me if you've had a different experience, but what I personally see is when you offer fruit to children, they have no problem or issue with eating fruit, with eating as much as they like, with enjoying fruit. And when you offer fruit to adults, you sometimes get a little bit of a different experience. So something's happening there, I think, where people are being, something's happening in the way that people are brought up, in the way that they are taught how to eat, in the way that they are trained to eat, that is causing people to have a strange relationship with fruit sometimes. Yesterday, we talked about, firstly, why health is the most important thing, why making changes to your diet is so hard. Talked about the problems with the standard diet and the cooked food. And we looked at, can we get all the nutrition we need from with a raw vegan diet? And if you want to rewatch any of those videos, they'll be up on our Fruitfest archive pretty soon. So you can rewatch those anytime. The problem, processed foods, animal products, and cooked foods make up almost the total volume in most human diets. And we actually looked at that in one of the first presentations, and we saw a chart that showed that processed foods and animal products make up a huge amount of the American diet, at least. But we have to, if we want to go raw vegan, we need to replace those foods and make sure we get adequate nutrition in the process. So how do we go about replacing all of these other foods with raw foods effectively in a raw vegan diet? And we have to think about designing a diet, an ideal diet. So when it comes to designing a diet for a human, we must take a few things into consideration. Most importantly, we need to get enough total calories. And that means our carbohydrates, fats, that we will get those from carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. The ideal human diet is really a diet where we get most of our calories from carbohydrates. This is once again not propaganda, not something I've made up. This is very mainstream information. And a nutrition textbook, if you open any nutrition textbook, they will say that the ideal source of energy for humans is carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is the best source of our energy. We also need to get enough micronutrients, which are the vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids. We actually covered that in the last presentation, not in the next one. And actually, I would argue that we should be more concerned about the first one here than the second. So we should be more concerned about the carbohydrates, the fats, and the proteins than we should about the micronutrients. And I think people get often concerned about the micronutrients without realizing what a huge impact the macronutrients have, especially if we don't eat these in the right proportions and if we don't eat enough of them, and that has much more of an impact for most people in terms of being able to enjoy the diet and thrive on the diet than any concerns they might have on vitamins and minerals that are generally not as much of a worry as people might think. To talk about calories a little bit, the calorie is a unit of energy used in nutrition. It's the amount of heat energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree. It's obviously how we measure the energy value of food. It comes from the Latin calor, meaning heat. And we'll look into how many calories you need in the raw vegan diet. We'll talk about planning the diet out. The average person needs around 2,000 calories per day. And if we don't eat enough calories from our food every day, then we'll run into a caloric deficit, and we have to replace that, obviously, with food. Regardless of how much nutrition the food has, if we can't get sufficient calories to fuel ourselves, then that food is not ideal. Even on a raw food diet, regardless of the nutrition content, we still must focus on getting enough calories primarily. And this is something we don't need to think about on standard diet, on the way that we've been brought up, even on cooked food to some degree. But people can even make this mistake with going to a cooked vegan diet, is we generally have already learned how to eat enough of whatever diet that we're used to. When we change to a raw diet, we're changing to something completely new, and we have to adapt to that, and we have to learn how to eat enough, actually. Historically, under eating has been a big problem on raw food diets. That's something that I've mentioned quite a lot yesterday. It's something to focus on and think about. Most people, if they start eating a raw food diet as an adult, they will not eat enough because they're not used to eating a raw vegan diet, and they will not feel particularly good, and they will have some issues when they do that, and they will undereat drastically, not just a little bit, but they will undereat quite drastically without realizing it. Symptoms of undereating. This is something you should be aware of. Low energy, hair loss, constant hunger, inability to get pregnant, sleep issues, irritability, feeling cold all the time, constipation, anxiety. But I would focus especially on some of the emotional ones here: irritability, anxiety, low energy levels, and sleep issues. These are ones that even with just a few days, maybe 3 or 4 days of undereating, you start to experience these pretty quickly. So when you start to experience some of these things, you might ask yourself if you're consuming enough. You might want to think about that. It's worthwhile being aware of this list and remembering it. Feeling cold as well is another symptom of undereating. Hair loss can be a symptom of undereating. At the same time, it can just be it can just be losing your hair, alopecia or whatever. Inability to get pregnant can be a sign of that, but these things are a little bit rarer. But these are some of the complaints people sometimes have of a raw food diet, that they tried it and they experienced some of these things, and actually it was maybe just that they were under eating. So our options for getting our calories in a raw vegan diet: how do we fuel ourselves? If we take out the processed foods, the animal products, how do we replace those calories? Our options would be vegetables, nuts or seeds, and fruits, basically, if we're talking about raw vegan foods. So let's talk about vegetables, and we can see here a monkey or an ape. I think this is a proboscis monkey, actually. And you can tell by the nose, and you can see it's got quite a large stomach there, and it happens to be eating leaves in this picture. But leafy greens and other vegetables are not really adequate to supply humans with enough calories. For example, one large head of iceberg lettuce, romaine lettuce, or Kos lettuce is around 100 calories. And we would have to consume around 20 whole heads of lettuce to meet the average caloric requirement daily. And that's a huge amount of volume, 35 pounds of food to eat. It would be very hard to fit that in our body and actually digest that fully. I've never done the experiment. Maybe you can do it, but it's probably quite hard physically even to do that. Primates that live on vegetation tend to have larger guts. If you think about for example, the gorilla, you can see that it's not a fat animal. This isn't body fat. This is the size of its gut internally, which helps it to be able to consume large amounts of vegetation which it can live on. Cruciferous vegetables, slightly larger vegetables, they're hard and tough to chew. They're a little bit harder to digest. 10 bunches of broccoli is about 2,000 calories. 10 large heads of cauliflowers could provide us with the calories, 7 large heads of cabbage. But once again, physically a little bit more difficult to digest. There'd be a lot of chewing involved to try and process this. And we don't really ideally have the digestive system for that. What about sprouts? Well, sprouts are fairly low in calories generally. Some are less so. But for example, mung bean sprouts, you'd have to eat about 60 cups to make 2,000 calories. 25 cups of lentil sprouts, 260 cups of alfalfa sprouts. So once again, it's a lot of volume to consume. It's a lot of chewing. It's not ideal for our system. So vegetables are not really ideal to try and eat in the quantities we'd require to get enough calories to replace the calories we need. What about raw root vegetables and legumes? Things like sweet potato and other root vegetables, they can be eaten raw. An interesting one that I was looking at recently, but this is never for sale really as a whole food that I've seen. Tell me if I'm wrong about this, but sugar beet. So sugar beet is a root vegetable that they make sugar from. Especially in the US, they grow a lot of sugar beet and create sugar from it. I've never seen it as a raw vegetable to be purchased, but apparently it's got so it's mildly sweet taste. I've never tasted it, but sweet potato, some other root vegetables, they can be eaten raw. They're generally not eaten raw, and they're not so enjoyable to eat in their raw state generally. Raw legumes, peas, sweet corn, and so on, they can also be consumed raw. They're more commonly cooked to make them easier to consume. There are varieties, more modern varieties that are easier to eat and digest. And it's maybe a little bit easier to try and eat these in the quantities to fulfill your caloric needs. But generally people don't eat these quantities of these foods, and they're not ideal digestion wise. Our second option might be nuts and seeds. If vegetables are not really ideal raw, nuts and seeds, we can easily satisfy our caloric needs by consuming small volumes of nuts and seeds. For example, 3 cups of cashew nuts, I should say cashew, sorry, is approximately 2,000 calories. 3 cups of cashews, almonds, or pistachios, about 2,000 calories. Chia seeds are similar to nuts in calories. Sesame seeds, 2 cups, 2,000 calories. Sunflower seeds, 2.5 cups, 2,000 calories. So they're very highly calorically dense because they are the large proportion of our calories comes from fat, and grams of fat tend to be more than double the amount of calories of grams of carbohydrate. Overwhelmingly, though, the calories in nuts and seeds come from fat, and a diet with fattier foods is easier to overeat. One problem, making it easier for us to actually gain weight and become overweight. A diet high in fat slows down our blood flow and affects our blood sugar. So a lot of blood sugar issues that people experience are actually not a result of too much sugar or too much fruit, but they're a result of too much fat in the diet. And that destabilizes our ability to regulate our blood sugar and is a contributor towards diabetes. mainstream guidance suggests our diet should be at least 60% carbohydrate. So that's what the mainstream is suggesting. We would suggest a higher carbohydrate diet than that, but that's the kind of minimum that the mainstream would suggest. So eating nuts and seeds as a high caloric part of your diet does not fit in line with trying to eat a healthy diet. For many people as well, nuts and seeds are difficult or painful to digest in large quantities. So a lot of people don't do well with those. I tend to eat nuts. I could eat nuts and seeds in quite high quantities, but over the course of time, don't really particularly enjoy the experience of doing that. But they can be enjoyable to eat, of course, in limited amounts. In raw food, historically, a lot of people were getting a lot of their calories, too many of their calories from nuts and seeds, and this predictably created a situation where people are going to fail in that diet and not feel particularly good. And a lot of what you'll see a lot of the time is when people try and live on a raw food diet with nuts and seeds being a large part of it, is these same people will often do a juice cleanse or a juice fast or regular, some kind of cleanse regularly, to try, I guess, to take a break from their diet because they're not they're maybe not doing so well in their diet. So I always think, and I always think with the raw food diet, if you're gonna, the reason that people do this diet is really to feel good. It's not just to eat raw. And if you're not feeling good, if you're not feeling your best, it becomes sort of pointless to do it. Nuts are probably often not actually raw either, but dried and therefore dehydrated to some degree. A lot of them can be quite, there's a kind of a moreish quality to nuts. There's a feeling like you want to keep on eating them, especially when they're dried. So fruit is our best option. That's the only, it's really the only option left for what we can live on. Fruit supplies us with the nutrition that we need in the best package and in the proportions that are best for our health. And I think that a lot of people resist fruit because they've been brought up to feel like it's a snack food. And also they've been brought up that, this was certainly in me, that to me food meant savory. A dinner, a large lunchtime meal, a large dinner meal, that meant a savory taste. That's what was always, that's what I was grown up on. That's what I believe. So transitioning to the idea of eating fruit as a diet, as a large meal, was a really difficult concept for me to grasp at first. And I think for a lot of people, it's a hard thing to grasp the idea of making a meal out of fruit and making a meal out of sweet food. But to look at fruit and why is it so ideal for us? Firstly, it is delicious in its raw state. We don't really have any resistance to eating fruit in any way. It looks good. It tastes very easily good. We eat it very easily. We can see it and find it very easily if we're going to looking for fruit somewhere. And it's and even wild fruit. So a lot of people might say, well, that's because it's modern fruit and it's been grown in a particular way. But none of that is actually really the truth. And there's plenty of wild fruits that are just as delicious and easy to eat and edible in their raw state. And if there wasn't, then we couldn't have large primates living on a mostly fruit diet, as most of the large anthropoid primates like us are doing in the wild. And we can quickly develop a new habit of eating larger fruit meals to cover our caloric needs. So it's not that difficult to start eating more fruit. Fruit supplies us with simple carbohydrates to fuel our body. And it's important that we think about carbohydrates, as carbohydrates are really essential for us to fuel our body correctly. And why do we say simple carbohydrates? Well, they're simple in the sense of, they're not just simple in terms of the chemical structure, which is part of the reason they're called simple, but they're simple in terms of they're simple and easy to digest. the simple carbohydrates in fruits, the glucose and fructose, are almost immediately able to be transported into our bloodstream, go directly to our cells very quickly and easily. And other types of carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, have to be changed into simple carbohydrates within the body. So they're not as ideal a fuel source. So fruit supplies us with our ideal fuel source. Fruit is also full of water, and of course, hydration is important. Some people don't drink that much water on a raw vegan diet. Some people believe they still have to drink a lot of water. And I guess it will depend for you on your own feeling on that. But when we remove salt from the diet and other dehydrating factors, and we go towards fruit, and fruit is obviously so abundant in water that we can really supply a lot of our need for water with fruit rather than having an additional 8 glasses a day, as is suggested sometimes. Fruit is our best source of critical vitamins. As we saw yesterday in the presentation, it's very easy to get all of the vitamins that we need on a fruit diet, especially vitamin C, vitamin B1, vitamin B3, which are vitamins that historically people have developed deficiency problems in large geographic populations, or in large numbers anyway. So these are the kind of critical vitamins that we need, and there are many more, but fruit is the best source for these. Fruit is also abundant in fiber. It is the easiest and quickest food to digest. Fiber is essential for proper digestion, which is why it's not great to live on processed foods and animal foods. And this is part of the reason a lot of people have digestive problems and constipation, is they don't have enough fiber in their diet. But fruit is also the quickest transport food, as in it goes through the human body the quickest. And even if you eat fruit, well, this has been my experience. If you eat fruit after a particular food, you will find that the fruit still digests quicker. So the digestive system doesn't work in a queue system. Whatever is the fastest to digest will go through the system quicker. Interestingly enough, this is the opposite in other animals. So a cat won't digest fruit quicker than other food. A chicken won't digest fruit quicker than other food. It depends on what that particular animal is designed to consume. So the fact that fruit is the quickest transport food through our body is another good sign or argument that it is the best food for us. My personal experience is that fruit not only passes through the digestive system easily, but with almost unnoticeably. It's almost, in comparison to other foods, if you eat a fruit diet, it passes into your stomach, obviously in your mouth. It very easily breaks down. It goes to your stomach very easily. You don't really feel it even in your stomach that much. I don't feel it moving through my digestive system. I don't hear any sounds, the kind of sounds that people get typically. When I was younger, I used to get acid reflux, and I don't really receive that anymore. But at the times that I have, if I ever have had acid reflux, which is where the stomach acid comes back up into the throat, into the mouth, and is a burning sensation and very uncomfortable. But the times when I have experienced that on a fruit diet, which is very rare, the acid actually tastes like water. I'm not sure exactly why, but it's obviously not burning. It's obviously not a very high pH. Our stomach acid can get stronger in the presence of other foods, but it's not ideal. And we can keep the pH of our stomach acid down by eating a fruit diet. And it passes through the digestive system very quickly and easily, and also it doesn't leave any foul smell when it leaves the body. So if you've never experienced that, this is the kind of thing that starts to confirm for you that fruit is really an ideal food for our body, because the body seems to deal with it so well. here's an interesting thing. I was actually researching this recently, and I probably need to change something about this. But the reason really that fruit is best for us is we're designed to eat fruit. Now, this is a quote from Carolus Linnaeus. He was a Swedish naturalist, botanist, who established the modern scientific method of classifying plants and animals. But I could never find the source for this quotation. Apparently, he said, to say that humans have the anatomical structure of an omnivore is an egregiously inaccurate statement. Man's structure, internal and external, compared with that of other animals, shows that fruit and succulent vegetables are his natural food. So I actually contacted, there's a society in London called the Linnaean Society. They're a society, I guess they're based around various things to do with biological research, but they're connected with Carolus Linnaeus, and they have a library there, and they have his works and writings are housed there in this place in London. I just sent them an email and said, can you confirm if this quotation is right and where it comes from? And the man, and it was really great. The guy got back to me and said, one of the librarians, he said, I'll need to take a few days to check this out. I thought I wouldn't get any, I didn't think I would get any response. But he said, let me take a few days looking at this. And he got back to me and he said, well, it can't be a direct quote because he only ever wrote in Latin and Swedish, but his main works were written in Latin, so it could be a direct quote. But he did say that in referring to human teeth, that the human teeth fell in line with the frugivores. They were frugivorous teeth, but he didn't actually make a statement that humans were frugivores. I don't think, but I need to read through the email again, and I'm probably going to make a video about it or write a blog about that, and put that out there, because this sometimes gets shared and it's probably not exactly accurate, this quote. So be good to correct that. But others have looked at the comparative anatomy and looked at the charts, and there's some charts like this of comparing carnivores, omnivores, herbivores, frugivore, and human, and we find that human tends to fit in line with frugivore. We have a teeth pattern that's very similar to the frugivores, or basically the same. Our stomach acid, the shape, the size, the length of our gut. The length of our gut compared to the area of the gut indicates frugivore. Intestines, sweat glands require fiber to stimulate peristalsis. Weak hydrochloric acid does not secrete uricase. Also, the fact we need to, I don't think it's mentioned there, but the fact that we need to create vitamin C. We need to take in vitamin C because we can't create it is another thing that we share with other frugivorous, mostly fruit-eating animals. So there's a lot of signs there showing our connection between us and frugivores. Some people do still suggest there are some adaptations to eating cooked food. One of them people talk about, there's more amylase, there's more certain starch breakdown, enzymes that can break down starch. There's more of those in our saliva than in other apes. And although that might be the case, it can't be particularly strong because, for example, if you try and eat a starchy banana, it's very difficult and not particularly appealing. It doesn't break down very easily. So if we do have enzymes for breaking down starch, and some people argue that means that's for helping with breaking down cooked food, I would still suggest we're still far superior at breaking down fruit. If I put a banana in my mouth, it starts to break down very quickly into a mush. I don't find the same with bread or other starch-based foods. So from what I remember, those were very dry and didn't really break down that well. So still much more superior at consuming fruit, even if that was the case. Fruit appeals to all of our senses. Fruit is beautiful. It's something that we have turned into art. We actually design other things around the patterns, the colors of fruit. We use the words of fruit for companies like Apple. orange. A number of different company names have used fruit, and there's a positive feeling, there's a positive belief, idea, image towards fruit. So here's just some nice pictures. Fruit kind of sells itself. This is durian, in case some of you have never seen this. It's a fruit that's from Southeast Asia. It gets a really bad rap for smelling bad. It really doesn't smell bad. I don't know why. I don't really know why people say that. But it's very delicious when it's good. Papayas, the color, all the different colors of fruit indicate actually different different types of nutrients in it, particularly different antioxidants. That would be something like a chempedak. That's another fruit from Southeast Asia. Very delicious, very sweet and delicious fruit. And so we can just see the appealing flavors, the colors, the textures. They immediately are appealing to our senses. And pictures like this are very inviting, colorful, abundant. Something I'm realizing recently, I don't know if any of you've seen this. Yesterday, I went quite late after our class yesterday. I went out to a couple of supermarkets and I could not find any lettuce. And I don't know, I don't think that that's common for this time of night. I think there's something happening with lettuce and maybe another few foods. There's not as much of it at the moment. But so there's some empty shelves at the moment from what I see. But pictures like this, colors like this are very appealing to our senses immediately. And part of the reason we have color vision is to do with our relationship with fruit and being able to detect fruit and see fruit. And it's something that people don't realize is another one of our superpowers. A lot of our superpowers are related to fruit, so we don't really see them as superpowers somehow. But if you go walking in a wood, in a forest, you'll be able to pick out the colors of even very small flowers in the distance. And amid all the foliage, you're able to detect fruit. And actually that seems to improve as well as you start to eat more fruit. You become more and more aware. And you can look to stars at the other side of the galaxy and so on, and you can see the colors. You know, we have really pretty decent color vision for detecting just slight differences of colors. A lot of that's to do with our fruit eating. Now, color vision comes as a result of having to be able to see fruits in jungle canopies. So animals that see in black and white, a lot of animals don't see a lot of color. They're not really able to do that and detect that, and they might rely on sense of smell. Our sense of smell is relatively weak, but you can identify fruits easily. If any of you've ever had a lot of bananas in your house or any other fruits, and someone walks in, they'll often say, "Oh, bananas." They immediately smell and identify it. And it is sometimes a bit overpowering for them. So our sense of smell is pretty good for certain things, but durian is the other one that really is a strong smell, and you can always tell if durian's in someone's house. I would argue not a bad smell, but a strong smell. So obviously we have some degree of a sense of smell, but it's not really good for detecting like live animals that we run after. Our taste buds are also trained to identify and enjoy sweetness, avoid bitterness, and they're stimulated by sour acid flavors. And a lot of people don't like vegetables. Some people have more of a sensitivity to the bitterness in certain vegetables, and they tend to try and avoid those. But we really have a tendency to go towards sweetness, and certainly with children, they're tasting food often to try and find sweetness. That's what they're looking for. We're also stimulated by the sour and acid flavors. These are indications of ripeness, freshness, and certain nutrient quantities as well. There's some fruits apparently, this is how to explain this. Apparently, some fruits can appear to be sweeter than they are due to certain acid flavors in them, and some of these fruits have evolved to trick us to want to eat them more, even though they've got less sugar in them, but they've actually got, they taste, they reflect sweetness to us because of the acid flavors in them. So there's an interesting interaction there going on between fruits and the animals that eat fruits. I don't know if some of you have seen the film The Fruit Hunters. That's a good film to check out, and there's a little bit of a lot about the history of fruit and fruit growing, and there's a lot of good stories in that. The Fruit Hunters, if you want to check that out. Fruit in our digestive system. It's easily digested. It's the quickest transit food for humans. Now, a lot of people are concerned about fruit, and when I was doing some advertising for this event, I looked at some of the comments. A lot of the comments were saying that must be bad for your digestion, and that will make you be regular, and all these weird comments about digestion. And a lot of people attribute problems to fruit, especially even people with chronic diseases, and they'll say, oh, I can't eat fruit, I've got Crohn's disease, I can't eat fruit, I've got colitis. And it's so ironic that they've never eaten much fruit. You know, in reality, the fruit wasn't the cause of their problem. And if they were to go on fruit, they'd probably get some release or relief from their problems. But sometimes the interaction between fruit and other food is not ideal. And what can happen is a person can have had certain foods the night before that are still in their stomach, that are still in their system. And when you eat fruit on top of that, then it might not be the ideal combination. That might cause some less than ideal feelings. Another thing is if your bloodstream is full of fat, and then you add a lot of sugar on top of that in the form of fruit even, then that might not be the most ideal feeling for a lot of people. And you know, for a type 2 diabetic, it's not ideal to just straight away eat a ton of fruit. It's probably good to maybe do a fast for a day or so and then change to this kind of a diet. But in general, fruit on its own, without the other foods there, without less than ideal foods in the system, digests very easily, very quickly with no problems. Our teeth are perfect for chewing fruit. Our saliva aids in rendering fruit to a mush prior to being swallowed. Once again, it's another thing that people don't take into account, how easy it is to chew up and eat fruit. But it's easy for us. It's not easy for all animals. If you've ever seen a chicken try to eat a banana, it's not as easy for a chicken to eat a banana as it is for us. So we really render fruit to a mush due to our enzymes, and those enzymes are designed for fruit. Our stomach acid is relatively weak, but it's perfect for, I shouldn't really say low protein, but the ideal amount of protein foods like fruit, which is low compared to what most people consume. And there's a lot of stomach problems. There's a lot of stomach cancer. There's a lot of digestion problems in general. A lot of cancers involved in the digestive system. And there's a number of different problems to do with high protein. But a lot of people have issues with their stomach, with stomach acid, with acid reflux, as I had. And we can digest the high protein foods, but we have to create a lot more stomach acid in order to do that. And that can have consequences such as heartburn, acid reflux, and things like that. And those things are a contributor towards cancer risk. Fruit is also eliminated from the body easily with no foul smell. A lot of people will make fun of vegans or raw vegans and maybe say, you know, you think that your SHIT don't stink or whatever, and it really doesn't. And I think that's just what your body, that's how your body should function. And we shouldn't be producing something that's so foul smelling and that's what most people do. So, and also it doesn't interact, it doesn't give us body odor and things like that. In terms of fruit farming, why would fruit be really good for our environment if we were to start eating more fruit? And a lot of people are concerned environmentally with the idea that fruit is often transported, and in this country that we have to transport a lot of fruit in, although less than people think to some degree. But most of the fruit that is transported comes in boats, and that's the same as a lot of other products that come into the country, coming in boats. And that the transportation is not a high part of the, in terms of food production, the transportation is not a big contributor. It's not a huge contributor towards the environmental impact. So it might not be best to have fruit that's flown in. That's probably not the best thing, but most of our fruit is not being flown in. Fruit is the highest yield food per acre, bananas in particular. What that means is that we could use less land. If we went towards more fruit, we'd be able to use less land to produce the food that we require. And that would probably be a good thing. Apart from for people who own a lot of land, who who would probably see the price of their land go down unless we find other things to do with it, rather than just allowing it to go back to nature. More fruit means more trees. That's immediately better for our environment as well. Obviously, when it comes to carbon emissions and things like that, trees are good at storing carbon, which would help. And trees are also systems where other life forms can grow and contribute towards diversity and so on. Fruit trees and fruit orchards are also beautiful to humans. Fruit is a sign of abundance. I don't know if you've ever had an experience where you've come across an orchard of fruit trees. Not so much in some places. In other parts of the world, maybe more common. Even old abandoned fruit orchards and stuff like that, to come across them, and it can be an amazing sight. Personally, I always like to be around fruit trees. I think there is a relaxing effect, as it is with many aspects of nature, of the natural world, but fruit trees are a great and beautiful thing. And I do think that fruit gives us a sign of abundance, which is why we have Christmas trees in the winter, at the darkest time of the year. And I'll finish with this quote, if I can see it. Give me a second. There's a control panel that keeps on popping up at the top of the screen. A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they know they shall never sit. I've always liked that phrase. A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they know they shall never sit. There are various old traditions and laws around fruit trees as well. In the Jewish tradition, there's a law against cutting down fruit trees, which is very interesting. But I think that's the end of this presentation. Yeah. So that's my little argument about fruit and why we should have no fears around fruit, no concerns around fruit, no worries around fruit, and we should embrace fruit as being the staple part of a raw vegan diet. I actually finished perfectly on time there. It's brilliant. I'm going to go through some of the comments and see if there's any particular questions coming up. Let me go down. Let's go. Sorry, let me go back. I'm going up quite a bit. So Sasha's saying, I never knew that about sugar beet. Where I grew up in Shropshire, it was growing all around me, but I never tried it. Well, I didn't know it was growing. I didn't really know much about it. I guess it is grown in the UK. So I just saw a farm. I literally just saw a video of a farmer this morning. I like to watch farmers sometimes and learn a little bit about how they grow food and what they're doing. And he just had the sugar beet and he cut the skin off of it. It's dirty on the outside. But he cut the skin off and then he chopped a bit off and he was eating it. And he said it's not very sweet, but it's a mildly sweet flavor. And it's not as sweet as sugarcane. Sugarcane is very sweet and delicious. I don't know if you've ever tried sugarcane, but it's not as sweet as sugarcane, but they can make sugar out of it. Now I don't know why it's not sold as like a snack or something. I don't know why it couldn't be. Eddie's saying I've seen people eat it in the Caribbean. I've never seen people eat it. I've never been to the Caribbean. Fruit is also the cheapest food in the world. Found bananas for €1 a kilo in the market. I was so happy. It can be free. I mean, that's the thing about fruit. if we replaced a lot of the trees around with fruit trees, it's free and it produces that food every single year. Fruit is delicious. The future's bright, the future's orange. And Eddie's saying I can't stand durian. The durian market in Malaysia overwhelmed my olfactory capacity to withstand. And if you go to Thailand, I've not been to Malaysia, but certainly Thailand, Vietnam, if you go to hotels, they will often have a sign saying no durian. Some of the transport systems have signs saying no durian, and then you have to try and sneak them in, and they fine you or they don't let you in. So yeah. But I remember cycling through Thailand and through Chiang Mai in Thailand, and then going past an open, truck with durian, and I loved the smell. It just hit me like a wave, like a carpet of smell. And I don't know what it is. Some people don't like it, I suppose. I tend to think that it's a fruit that takes a little while to get used to, unless you have a really good one first time, which most people don't. And when you have a really good ones, I think it can change the way you taste it and your feeling towards it. Priya says there's a lettuce shortage at the moment. And I thought that lettuces actually grow in, like they've got these indoor lettuce sort of mountains that they grow, these weird things for growing lettuce. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but iceberg lettuce is what I usually eat. But even romaine and everything. I was in Morrison's last night, supermarket. I was in Aldi. Now, to be fair, I went in at night, but I don't think I've ever seen the shelves so bare for produce. There was still plenty of certain things. But for some reason, yeah, lettuce, not a lot of lettuce around. Mother Earth couldn't have invented a more beautiful thing for us. So we start to develop a bit of a passion for fruit, and some people say that I've got a dogma towards fruit, but I think it's a very natural, positive relationship towards what is a very healthy, our healthiest food. Rachel says she's not a durian lover either. That's a shame. Somebody's asking if they can access the course. Yeah, these videos, we'll put them up. I will probably run this again as well. I'll probably try and keep running this and changing it a little and improving it, and maybe bringing some other people in to talk on it. Coming up to the festival, we need to keep on putting the message out there as well for that. So we'll probably keep on, but these are getting recorded and they'll be on our archive, and there's free access to the archive for a month. So everyone can go and watch it for free if they like, and I'll put that out for everyone. I always think it's better to attend in person. Generally, I think that helps people. It seems fruit is more often used in supermarket commercials, interior design, delivery truck design, rice, beans, and animal products usually are less used. Yeah, and even if they use everything else, the fruit's quite prominent and the vegetables are quite prominent. And when we make food, it's often made to look more like fruit, as in more colorful. The kind of size of fruit generally. To some degree, the texture of fruit, trying to make food softer to make them more edible, adding in acid, adding in vinegar, often to make that acid bite, obviously adding in sugar to make it sweeter. So we often see foods being manipulated to be a bit more fruit-like. But certainly, they've obviously worked this out, that when they do posters of raw meat, that people don't react as well towards it. When they do posters of fruits and vegetables, people react well towards it. So obviously, and I think the design of supermarkets, I think they've worked some of these things out over the years, what's attractive to people and what people like. All I would say about durian is, I mean, you've probably tried it. Never give up on it completely, because you might have just not tried a really, really good one. It depends. You might have, but there's a lot of different flavors there as well. But you might enjoy the Chempedak more, the jackfruit, guanabana, soursop. There's a lot of other fruits out there. Everyone immediately comments on the lovely strong scent of oranges, easy peelers. It's uplifting. Yeah, and I think a lot of if you think about the smells that we use, essential oils that people use, that are usually flowers or fruits, shower gel. People have like tropical fruit shower gels and stuff like that. So these particular oils, these particular essential oils, well, particular oils that are in fruits are very appealing to our senses. I personally quite like certain perfumes, you know, even though I'm a natural kind of diet, natural sort of lifestyle person, I appreciate that. But I do quite like if someone walks past with a really nice perfume. I quite like that. And but certain smells are nicer than others and have more of an impact. And these generally come from flowers and fruits, and to do with being more attracted to us. Eddie's saying my mum had stomach cancer, then in diverticulitis, but wouldn't change her diet, which was very sad indeed. And sadly as well, when someone has already got cancer and some of these problems, sometimes they've already gone a little bit too far for anything to happen, which is the sad thing about it. Even if they change to a perfect diet, which is very difficult for people to do, especially when they're sick already. But I had a friend that died of stomach cancer as well. In fact, I could know a couple of people that died of stomach cancer. And where do people think that comes from? You know, it comes from, if you just keep on putting less than ideal fuel into, it's the same if you put it down in your car, and obviously a mechanical machine that's made by humans breaks down a lot quicker, but because it doesn't heal itself. But eventually the human body can't keep on healing itself over and over to the best of its ability. Diverticulitis, I don't know much about what that is. I think it's a digestive problem, damage to the intestines and so on.
What it is, Ronnie, is basically you end up with little pockets of little balloons in the intestine. It's basically a result of, sorry, I'm not on because I'm still recovering. It's little balloons in the intestinal tract, because it's a sort of a progression from leaky gut, leaky gut syndrome, because you've obviously got the epithelial, which is actually being broken. Yeah. And when it gets worse, you end up with these little pockets in the intestinal wall, and the food gets stuck in there. Little pockets of food get stuck in there. So obviously that putrefies and produces all sorts of nasty metabolic debris. And it gets worse, of course, it's and the end result, of course, was very sadly she ended up having 4 operations, none of which actually did anything. So yes, so it is a warning to anybody not to eat processed foods. Not a good idea.
Certainly not to live on them. Yeah. And is that something that is that a common thing, diverticulitis? Is that quite common? Or?
It's not uncommon, should we say, with the rise in diabetes, obesity, and all the rest of it. Obviously, these sort of diseases are on the increase, which are directly related to diet. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say it's uncommon. I haven't looked at the figures on diverticulitis, but I know that stomach cancer and digestive issues are very much on the rise. It's all inflammation, of course.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm interested in the pockets. Do they heal up?
Not unless, as I say, as you were mentioning before, there is some relatively early intervention. I mean, it can be healed over time, but it would take a long time. And also, you know, things like emotional support as well, because you can't obviously go onto a raw vegan diet with any sort of intervention from somebody who knows what they're doing, like a proper practitioner.
Yeah, yeah. And I have had lots of optimistic ideas sometimes about trying to help people change their diet and so on. But often when someone, I mean, I had a friend with stomach cancer, I could stay with him for a little bit, and it just became clear very quickly that he was so far along. And at that point, he could barely eat food. So there wasn't really a great opportunity of changing his diet or helping him when he was struggling to eat at that point and struggling to drink water even. And yeah, it's definitely something to avoid for sure. And it's another big sign, another motivation, another motivation to share this information with other people as well, and try and, all these people did not think they were doing something wrong and were following what they had been taught from a young age, from before they were really conscious or aware of these choices, and ended up just with a habit every day that led to these problems. So but
I think one of the problems as well, Ronnie, is stomach cancer in its early stages is not easily detectable. In fact, the way they found out about my mother's stomach cancer is they'd taken her in for something else. And then they found that she had stomach cancer. So, if that hadn't been detected, by the time it is detected, it's usually too late.
Similar to my friend, actually. He had Parkinson's. So they were just telling him, because he had certain symptoms, and they just said, this is your Parkinson's. So it was far too late by the time that they realized he had cancer. But yeah, I think that's the case with a lot of cancers. For some reason, they get detected very late, and people seem to be able to live with them for a long time before they notice. I'm not sure what's going on in terms of whether the person notices it or is avoiding it or in denial, or they simply aren't aware of it. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think it's probably all of them. I mean, obviously, most people are in denial most of the time, or as you were saying yesterday, well, I'd rather sort of die young and happy, rather than sort of, feel that I'm being deprived. So it's a big mindset thing. And, as we've had conversations before about the mindset, unless you've got the real motivation to want to do something, you're not going to do it, unless you can see a positive outcome. The sort of the brain will automatically, the default system as well, I'm in my comfort zone, but actually it's not a comfort zone at all, because what you eventually end up with was a huge amount of discomfort. But I was watching a video last night on YouTube, actually, and I just came across it by chance, called The Big Secret. Mm-hmm. And that was, it was on in the States, showing how, everything about medicine, was hijacked, by pharma, and the criminality of, the way it's gone, because it's, very good at surgical interventions. But as these doctors were saying last night, we could do so much if we talked about prevention. But, Big Pharma's lobbies has got more than 1,200 lobbyists in the US government, whatever they call it, so, and they spend billions, more than 2 billion a year on advertising. So, when you look at that, it's not just about, is food good for you? You're in a political debate as well, but that's, that's another discussion. But yeah, I mean, unless people are really educated, then there is going to be an issue about being able to stand out initially on your own to say, well, I'm going raw, and then trying to find the right people who are going to support you.
Yeah, it's such a, I'm just going to stop the recording so I can start the next